Get out with your kids, old hag. The lover was standing in front of me, holding a 1-year-old child she had hidden away. I was dumbfounded by her condescending tone, but I replied, "Fine. Here's the divorce papers. But I'm leaving the 3 kids behind." "What? You take care of them. They are your kids, after all." "That's right, fulfill your responsibilities as a mother." Even my husband started to berate me. Frustrated by their selfish remarks, I inadvertently let out a deep sigh and said, "You're joking, right? Because these kids are." "What?" My words seemed to have caught them off guard. Now, it was my husband and his lover who stood with their mouths agape, staring at me in shock. Then, they made a foolish decision. Watching their shallow judgment, I sighed softly to myself. They didn't understand the gravity of the situation at all. Pitying them, I decided to contact someone. "My name is Kate, and I'm 40 years old. Currently, I work from home and am actively seeking a spouse. I have devoted myself to my job since childhood to achieve my dreams. However, upon turning 40, I noticed that most of my friends were already married with children. Is this really okay?" Once I started thinking about it, I couldn't stop. One day, I vented my frustrations mixed with sighs to a visitor at my home. The visitor, a work acquaintance and close friend who knew my personality well, replied with a wry smile, "Well, I can't say for sure, but getting married might open up a new world for you." The acquaintance was a work-related contact, but our long association had evolved into a sort of friendship, and she knew my personality well. Her casual remark made me pause in realization. Maybe it will open up a new world. Those words were intriguing to me because of my profession. Of course, I didn't take marriage lightly. I've heard plenty of complaints from married friends, and encountered negative information about marriage daily through articles and television. Yet, my curiosity became uncontrollable, and that very day, I registered on several dating apps. Though it may seem frivolous, I've always lived by following my inquisitive nature and applying it to my work. This time, too, I acted on impulse. Little did I know what the future held. Among the messages I received on the dating app, one from a man named Ben Thompson, a 45-year-old employee, stood out. His messages were very polite, and I quickly took a liking to him. We shared hobbies, and our conversation flourished around books. As we continued to exchange messages, and just when I felt things were going well, Ben invited me to meet for a meal. I promptly agreed. That weekend, we had our lunch date. Ben was just as calm and composed as his messages had suggested. His gentle manner and kind demeanor made me wonder why such a wonderful man had been single until now. Curious, I asked him, and he replied with a slight, apologetic smile. "Actually, I was once married and got a bit burned by the experience. Plus, work kept me so busy that I just got older without realizing it." Indeed, Ben was divorced, a fact noted on his profile page. Despite this, something about his photo had caught my eye, perhaps it was intuition. After comparing many other men's profiles, none attracted me as much as Ben. Meeting him confirmed my instincts were right. I strongly felt I wanted to date Ben. Our meal was delightful, and we quickly made plans for another date. 2 months later, Ben proposed to me. I was thrilled and agreed to marry him quickly. While I wondered about the speed of our engagement, I rationalized that at our age, there was no point in delaying. Given our ages, I'm not too fussy about having a wedding ceremony. If that's what you want, I have no objections. Overcome by embarrassment, I almost skipped the wedding preparations and decided to move in with Ben immediately. I wanted to start our married life as soon as possible. Thus, I quickly handled all the necessary procedures and moved into Ben's house. But before that, Ben and I had this conversation. Sorry, but could you handle this while you're running your errands? He handed me a marriage registration form, already signed by him as the applicant and guarantor. Understood. I'll submit it later. I took the documents, but with all the moving and paperwork, I forgot to submit them. As I planned to do it later, sudden work emergencies piled up. And I completely forgot about it until after I had moved into his house. Realizing this, I thought to myself, I must not forget to submit it later as I walked into his house. That's when something unbelievable happened. For the first time, I discovered that Ben had children. During the 2 months we dated, I had never been invited to his house. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but now it seemed there was a reason. And it was a bit of a shock. As I stood there dazed, Ben suddenly spoke in a stern voice. Ah, yes. From now on, you'll also be taking care of the kids. Don't slack off. His tone had changed from before as he ordered me around. As I exclaimed, "What?" 3 young boys came bustling out from the back of the house. Huh, so this is the new mom? What? No way, she's just the maid, right? Come on, Alex, that's harsh to say right off the bat to someone you just met. The 3 of them stared rudely at me and burst out laughing noisily. As I stood there, taken aback, Ben cleared his throat loudly. Hey, cut it out, all of you. Upon his stern reprimand, the 3 boys chorused a belated okay. These are my sons. From oldest to youngest, Chris is 18, Alex is 17, and Justin is 16. All are in high school, and Chris is a college applicant. Make sure you take good care of them. Saying this, Ben mentioned he was going to take a bath and left the room. I stood there for a while, dumbfounded, staring at the 3 boys. Then, they began to sneer and make belittling remarks again. What's with that stupid look, old hag? Yeah, don't just stand there. We're hungry. Hurry up and get dinner ready, maid. With that, they each retreated to their rooms. I was left alone at the entrance, standing in disbelief. So much had happened all at once, and I couldn't keep up. I had been busy all day and was utterly exhausted. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was now 7 p.m. I finally entered the house and headed for the kitchen, though told to make dinner without any guidance. It was my first time here and I didn't know where anything was. Sighing, I peeked inside the refrigerator only to find a few drinks and some condiments. How was I supposed to prepare a meal with this? Then, Ben, fresh from his bath, saw me standing lost in the kitchen and clicked his tongue in irritation. You're slow. Never mind, I'll order takeout for today. Don't bother cooking. I'm sorry. As I apologized, hanging my head, he clicked his tongue loudly again and snapped. Make sure you do your job properly tomorrow. He then stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. His cold demeanor left me wanting to cry and also filled me with a strong sense of suspicion. Silently, I began to formulate a plan. That day, although Ben mentioned he'd order takeout, he only ordered for himself and his sons, not for me. The 4 of them sat around the dining table, enjoying their hamburgers, while I could only watch from the kitchen corner. Noticing my gaze, Ben spitefully remarked, "That's your punishment for not making dinner. Go eat some ready-made food from the store." Hearing this, I bowed my head and left the house. There was a convenience store nearby, I remembered as I trudged off to buy my dinner. When I returned with my ready-made meal, Ben and his sons had already finished their dinner and returned to their rooms. The remains of their takeout hamburgers were left untouched on the kitchen table. I sighed as I cleaned up and ate my bland dinner alone. I hadn't expected such treatment on my first day. Perhaps this marriage was a mistake. Despite wanting to flee, I reconsidered. My married life had just begun. Maybe if we lived together long enough, we could become a real family. With this hopeful thought, I decided to try harder starting tomorrow. However, such resolutions were quickly shattered. The three sons were all selfish, treating me more like a servant than family. "Hey, where's my gym uniform? I told you to wash it yesterday. You always forget, so useless. And my uniform shirt is still wrinkly, seriously annoying." Saying that, the three of them berated me daily and hurled insults. Initially, they refused to let me enter their rooms. Ben's house was fairly large, with many rooms, and each child had their own. When I first came to the house and tried to clean their rooms, the three of them found out later and were furious, shouting at me. "Don't just come in here. Yeah, you're so annoying. You didn't take any of our stuff, did you?" Frightened by their accusations, I no longer dared approach their rooms. They would leave their laundry scattered, sometimes forgetting to include items for washing, and then blame me when things were amiss. Unable to endure it any longer, I consulted Ben, but he dismissed me. "I'm busy. Don't bring such trivial issues to me." After moving in, he had dumped all household and child-related responsibilities on me. Suddenly, his overtime and business trips increased, and he was rarely home on weekends. Moreover, both he and his sons seemed to view my home-based work as nothing more than a hobby, openly disparaging it. "How long do you plan to continue with such nonsense?" Whenever I was at my computer, Ben would sneer and sigh exaggeratedly, suggesting I was just playing around. His lack of empathy deeply hurt me. "Please don't speak to me like that. Actually, I'm going to be quite busy with work soon. Could you help out a bit with the household chores?" One day, when I desperately needed time for work, I asked him this. He exploded in anger. "Work? The work you're doing is hardly significant. Focus on getting the housework done perfectly. If you can't manage that, then quit your job." His ferocity left me speechless. I had explained my work to Ben before our marriage, and he had agreed I could continue it. He even promised to share household duties when work got busy. Yet now, he was completely negating his earlier assurances. Feeling deceived, I was left hollow. From then on, I resolved not to discuss work anymore. Until our living situation stabilized, I would focus on the household, thinking that would be best. Besides household chores, there was something else that needed my attention. It was about the three kids. On the surface, they seemed like model students, but I soon realized they were quite troubled. At school, they behaved without any issues, but at home, they invited bad company and engaged in problematic behavior. What started as hidden drinking and smoking a few months ago had now become blatant in front of me. They would disguise themselves to go out at night, continuing their habits of smoking and drinking. Concerned by their actions, I rushed to consult Ben, but he chose to believe the children over me. After all, the children committed their misdeeds when Ben was not at home, and he easily believed their side of the story. Then he coldly said to me, How can you say such demeaning things about your own children? I find your character, willing to falsely accuse them so easily, unbelievable. Ben's outright dismissal left me speechless, and seeing such a father. The children casually joined him in calling me terrible. Dad, she was slacking off with the housework yesterday too. Yeah, she seems to have been on the computer all day until we came back. The cleaning isn't done properly either. We can't concentrate on our studies like this. Then my husband scolded me fiercely. Being continuously blamed by both my husband and the children, I gradually lost my place in the home. Amidst this, I faced even further misfortune. Taking advantage of their father's trust, the sons not only looked down on me but also started pinning their own misdeeds on me. And they reported this to Ben. Hey, Dad. She was stealing money from your wallet. What? Is that true? There's no way I would do that. I desperately denied the accusation, but the children, smirking, didn't listen to my explanations. In the end, under the coercion of Ben and the children, I had to pay a substantial amount of money as compensation to avoid further punishment. This was how I was terribly treated by Ben and his 3 sons, enduring in silence. However, my silence was not out of resignation but to bide my time, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Although my feelings for them had nearly vanished, running away from this house would leave a bad taste in many ways. One day, about a year into the marriage, I noticed that among the friends hanging out with the sons, there was one who was always treated like a servant. Whenever he came to our house, he was always sent to the nearby store to buy drinks and snacks. That day, I quietly followed him as he was about to leave the house. Hey, you don't need to go buy anything. I've got some drinks and snacks prepared for you. When I spoke to him, he seemed relieved and stopped going to the convenience store. He thanked me politely and introduced himself. His name was Fred Johnson. He was a classmate of Justin's since their freshman year of high school. Things were good at first, Fred said softly. According to him, the boys hadn't always been this way. But their behavior escalated around the time the oldest was preparing for college entrance exams. Eventually, the sons began targeting Fred. He really wanted to stop hanging out with them but couldn't seem to get away. That's why he was relieved when I approached him. A month later, he confided something important to me, and I offered to help him discreetly. While I was dealing with the sons' issues behind the scenes, a change occurred between Ben and me. A month after I started consulting with Fred, a woman suddenly appeared at my doorstep with a baby. She bluntly said to me, "Hello, ma'am. My name is Emma Brown, and this child is Ben's. I'll be straightforward. Could you divorce Ben?" As I stood there stunned by this sudden revelation, she impatiently made a derogatory remark. "Get out with your kids, old hag." Then Ben, who arrived late, agreed with his lover, pressing me to divorce. "I'm sick of living with an old woman like you." I was disgusted by their condescending remarks and replied, "Fine, I'll leave as you say. But I'm leaving the 3 kids behind." "What? You take care of them. They are your kids, after all." "That's right, fulfill your responsibilities as a mother." I let out a deep sigh in response to their selfishness and said, "You're joking, right? Because these kids aren't mine. Besides, I'm not even married to Ben." "What?" My words apparently shocked Ben as he stared at me, his mouth agape. Yes, I never submitted the marriage registration Ben told me to. On the day it was revealed he had hidden his children from me and pretended we were married. I harbored a strong distrust towards him. I decided to see how things would unfold and refrained from registering our marriage. While opinions may vary, I continued to hide this fact and maintained a marital relationship with Ben for a specific purpose. So, I don't need to take care of the kids. I firmly stated this and announced my departure from the house. Initially stunned, Ben soon smirked unpleasantly, and his lover laughed loudly. What? Then we're even spared the hassle of a divorce and property division. Watching their shallow reaction, I sighed silently to myself. They foolishly understood nothing of the situation's gravity. While pitying them, I contacted Fred, the friend of the son, to inform him of something important. 2 weeks after I left Ben's house, his lover came to see me, her face distorted with anger. "Hey, you deceitful woman. You knew those kids were terrible troublemakers, didn't you? You wicked woman." She nearly lunged at me as she screamed these accusations. Yes, Ben had told his lover that the children were model students, and she had naively believed him. But in reality, they were far from it. "You knew they only acted like model students in front of Ben, didn't you?" She pressed me, demanding that I take the kids back. But I coldly told her, "This has nothing to do with me. Besides, they're causing even more serious trouble now." At my words, the lover burst into loud sobs. "I can't handle it anymore. Help me." With a sigh, I offered her some advice. "If you dislike it so much, why not just break up with Ben?" "But I don't want that either." She stomped her feet like a petulant child. "You dislike this and that, but that doesn't solve anything." I sighed again, exasperated. I closed the door on the lover who rejected all my suggestions, leaving her crying outside. Eventually, she quieted down. 2 weeks later, a book was released and became an explosive hit. It spread through word of mouth online, drawing significant attention. The story resembled my experiences with my husband and his lover. Indeed, the book was a novel I had written, based on my marriage to Ben. I am a romance novelist with a bit of a reputation in the field. My venture into a gritty drama of love and hate had caused quite a stir for its new style. I used social media to promote it heavily, sparking a major debate. Your new work is being highly praised as a fresh frontier. After some time, the acquaintance who had once told me that marriage might open up a new world came to visit, smiling broadly. Indeed, she was actually the editor responsible for my work. She knew my personality well, so perhaps she had anticipated this turn of events back then. If that was the case, it might seem a bit cunning. But since I went along with it, I couldn't really complain. Well, in a sense, it's like a personal novel, so maybe it's not something to be proud of. As I sighed, my acquaintance smirked and handed me an envelope. I took it with a puzzled look, and she said cheerily, "But it did help someone, right?" Suddenly recalling something, I hastily opened the envelope and pulled out the contents, a letter from Fred Johnson, a former friend of the son's. I quickly read through it and felt a profound sense of accomplishment as I exhaled in relief. The letter explained that Fred had been freed from bullying. Indeed, at the same time my book was released, the criminal activities of the former children had been reported with evidence, thanks to Fred's carefully gathered proofs. This had led to the police detaining the boys. Because of the uproar, Ben also became a topic of gossip in the neighborhood. Many readers pointed out similarities to the novel and speculated online, quickly identifying personal details in today's digital age. It was terrifying how the novel's models were pinpointed to be Ben and his family, causing him to be whispered about by neighbors. Eventually, the boys were sent to a juvenile facility due to the severity of their actions. But their poor attitudes apparently led to them being bullied there. Ben ultimately lost his job due to the scandal spreading to his company, finding himself without a place. When the lover found out Ben was unemployed, she took the child and fled. It turned out her attachment to Ben had been more about his income than love. She was reportedly struggling to raise the child alone, working in a night job. Ben, unable to find regular employment due to the scandal, resorted to day labor. This marriage experience allowed me to write novels from a different perspective. Though it might seem like I used my marriage to gain experience, I reconciled it with myself as acceptable. Though my time with Ben and his children was short, it seemed to have significantly grown me as a person. There might be others who suffer through worse marriages without being able to express their pain. I decided to focus on such people in my future novels. And with this experience, I aim to reach new heights as a writer, continuing to write works influenced by what I've gone through. Having set a new goal, I am now diligently working on a new piece at my computer.